The Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Hey everyone, we are the Unconventional Therapists, and this is your guide to nothing, where each and every week we take a topic, theme, or thing, overanalyze it, and make it all make sense in the scheme of life, living, and mental health. My name is Dave. I am your host, along with my co-host here. His name is Greg. He's an okay guy. We've been doing this for a while now. I also knew him before we did this. It's going all right, I guess.
Going pretty good. What do we think about this subject? This is your pick, heavy duty.
It was heavy duty.
It was a lot.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. Want me to give you an overview for it, and then we can just kind of dive right in?
Sure. If you think you can handle that.
I can handle it. You know, that's my thing. I'm Greg Overview Charpentier. That's my middle name. In 1978, that's not a funny joke. I realize that. In 1978, preacher, activist, and leader of a doomsday cult would lead around 900 Americans in what he called revolutionary suicide in the jungles of Guyana, changing the way people view cults. And for me, especially cult leaders, for like making the idea of cults much more dangerous. And of course, Dave, we're talking about Jimmy Jones.
I'm really shocked that you're already starting with the allegations, labeling this a cult.
Oh, yeah.
Is that even confirmed?
If ever there was a cult.
This is like the mother of cults.
It is. It really is. I don't know why. This one, and we're going to get into it, when you talk about charismatic leaders, this guy had it. And what's I think is dangerous about Jim Jones is I think that he was extremely intelligent and aware that he was a major manipulative figure instead of being a devout. Yeah, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
it's
I do want to say though, I think all of the cult leaders that we've become aware of so far, which is still very few compared to all the cults that exist, but like this is our third one that we've covered, and I would say all three cults involved charismatic leaders. Like that is definitely something that is required, I think.
Well,
David Koresh was definitely charismatic.
Koresh charismatic, but would you call Marshall Applewhite charismatic?
Yes, I would. He would. I think I joined Heaven's Gate when we did that.
You almost did. You almost did.
I do.
I pulled the plug on the computer last minute to make sure that guy couldn't keep talking to you because I saw you drifting. I saw you beaming up.
I feel like they definitely utilize that's a good point. They utilize their group members way more than David Koresh or Jim Jones. They were definitely more community based in the way that they drew people in. Not to say that Jonestown and Waco didn't also involve really dedicated community members, but it was different. So let's get into Jim Jones, because this man, this is a lot. I didn't realize how heavy this topic was going to be. There's a lot to Jim Jones, and I want to start off with early childhood, because I think that's important when we're talking about anybody's like story.
I'm starting to believe that too, Dave. That even when talking to people in our work, I was never a believer, and you know that I was never a believer in getting back to where the problem started. I was always like, what are the symptoms? What can we do to fix them? But now I'm starting to think of like why you do the things you do becomes so important. And understanding why you do the things you do gives you an opportunity to change the things you do. Yeah. And I mean, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but yeah, you're right. His early childhood really does speak to who he becomes.
Yeah. And I'm going to try not to be too long-winded, because I actually have like a lot of information that I want to unpack here, but I do think that this stuff's important. So I'm going to try to like keep this clear and concise. And Greg, if you need to speed me along, please feel free to do so. So he was born James Warren Jones on May 13th in 1931. So his actual birthday is coming up very soon. And by the time we air this, it will be just a few days.
He's a fellow Taurus. On May 12th.
Oh, geez, that's scary. So he was born in, I think you would call it Crete, Indiana, Crete, I guess. So he's born to both parents. His dad was a disabled WW1 vet, but he suffered some breathing problems due to injuries that were sustained from a chemical weapons attack, which I found the chemical weapons attack thing to be ironic because, as we'll get to in a little while, Jim Jones is very like scared of nuclear war attacks. So it's like, I don't know if that played into some of his paranoia later in life, but we'll get to that later. So his father's illnesses led to some financial difficulties just because of like inability to make steady income, I guess, work issues, things like that, which also caused intense marital issues between the parents. They were evicted from their home when Jim Jones was very young. I think he was about 3 years old when they were evicted, and relatives purchased a shack for them to live in a nearby town, Lynn, Indiana, which is where he grew up. And the shack was lacking plumbing and electricity. So these were pretty like rough circumstances.
So this stuff is going to play a role. His father not being taken care of by the government he served is going to kind of make him anti-establishment or anti-current government. And also growing up in this time, really poor. I think this is right around or right after the Great Depression.
Yeah,
that's
it's
going to
during. Actually, it's during.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if he's growing up during the Great Depression, he's going to develop that ideology that, you know, he's going to see the poor not getting what they deserve, and that's going to be another thing that's going to play a role in his
great
future.
Point. Yep, yeah. Great point. I didn't even think of that, to be honest, but yeah. So his father's health continued to deteriorate, which led to more income issues, and often they were lacking adequate food and continuing to rely on an extended family for, you know, all the necessities. So sources say that Jones's mother, she lacked natural maternal instincts, and as a result, she frequently neglected Jim. Jones' extended family over time threatened to cut off the support that they were offering unless the mom get a job. So she eventually did. And during the time when she had a job outside of the house, the father was hospitalized from time to time due to his illnesses, which left both parents frequently absent during Jim's childhood. He was said to be like walking around the streets as like an infant, like naked. Just totally like learning to have to like just care for himself, I guess, in a way, but like not physically, but more emotionally, right?
What about Jim's mom telling him that he was a messiah-like figure, like at a very early age? I read that somewhere. And I was thinking, like, maybe when he was born, maybe she had some mental health issues too, the mother, right?
Well, she actually thought he did, and I will get to that in a little bit. He thought he was off. But so since he was kind of neglected by the parents, he was cared for by female residents of Lynn, the community they lived in. Also interesting because we know later of his communal type living situations, right? So I think that's very interesting how even this negative situation kind of starts to shape the way he sees how the world maybe should be.
Right. So that's why he starts to think in terms of, and I'm sure you'll get to like socialism and communism, where this idea of communal living, this idea of being able to have a certain amount of goods in the world and getting it as needed instead of one person having all and some person having none, because he happened to be one of the people that had none growing up. And he knows how difficult that was.
Absolutely. So as he gets a little bit older, you know, he's a young kid. He's thought to be weird by other kids.
Sure.
He's obsessed with religion and death. He would read the Bible. He'd read books on Stalin, on Karl Marx, on Gandhi. He often went to church services at multiple churches, sometimes going to like numerous churches in a week, and even got baptized at several of them. So
yeah, I saw that kind of stuff too, like him putting on roadkill funerals and also having this weird habit where he would put other kids in dangerous situation and tell them that he was guided by the angel of death.
Yeah,
that's creepy. That's like good son stuff. Do you ever see that?
It's interesting too, because that also becomes a little bit of who he becomes later too, which I'll get to as he gets older. But you're right. He started to want to be a preacher and he began to practice in private, and then ultimately kind of like having these roadkill funerals. He allegedly killed a cat with a knife
Yeah.
and just to be able to perform the funeral. And he would attempt to get neighborhood children to sit into these funerals, and they wouldn't. He would just perform them alone.
Right.
Um,
Like he's like the pastor,
yeah, yeah,
which is just crazy. You can picture it like Jim Jones, little Jim Jones with his sunglasses on, just giving a sermon with like burying a raccoon or something. And
yeah.
you're bringing to mind another interesting point. So here's little Jim reading people like, all these dictators who found a way to exploit the needs of the poor. Like we're talking about Hitler, Stalin, Marx, who isn't a dictator, but I mean, he's wrote the Communist Manifesto, at least half of it. Mao Zedong, and then he sprinkles in Gandhi, which I always found kind of interesting. And when I was reading this, I thought it was interesting because reading these people, it really is like what Jim Jones is. He's like 4 parts evil dictator in 1 part Gandhi. He's like this weird, and well, this is foreshadowing, but he's like this weird mixed Kool-Aid mixture, right?
Yeah.
Where he's 4 parts, water, which represents like these evil dictators, and 1 part good. There's that little bit of goodness in Jim Jones that makes him an interesting figure.
Sure.
And
Sure.
I find that pretty fitting, like a fitting little metaphor.
And this is where I'm wondering if this is kind of maybe what you had read, but it just kind of in a different light. So his mom thought he was disturbed, and she actually discovered him imitating a local pastor. So she tried to punish him by trying to prevent him from going to churches. But that was unsuccessful, obviously, because little Jimmy Jones was not to be missing mass,
No, he's all about it. And this was, what are these, are you going to get into like, what are these religious services that he's at? Like, what are we dealing with here?
It was just numerous local, I'm assuming they were Christian churches in Lynn.
Yeah. And I think they're around that area, if not at this point, but later on, he would start to get into Pentecostal services.
I was just going to say Pentecostal
which is a little more extreme. It's that speaking in tongues and the holding the snakes. And I think that extremism plays a role too. So you can see this cult leader almost picking things up from different parts of life. Like he's picking things up from philosophy and from, world leaders, and learning how to deliver it through these pastors and religion. It's interesting.
And it is interesting also, like, as he's doing this, at first it starts off to be like this passion, this obsession, and then it gets a little strange, even stranger, I should say. He at some point feels like he has exceptional abilities. And at one point believes he can fly. So he jumps off a building and just falls and breaks his arm. But rather than like admitting like that he can't fly, he actually says it was like, in his mind, it was successful. He just hurt himself.
Yeah.
It's like he convinces himself that it's true, or maybe thinks he's convincing others. But maybe this is like before he's like honed his abilities,
right,
to mask the truth.
It's also saying that he's able to convince even himself of something that's clearly a lie to be true. And you can imagine what he's going to be able to do to other people.
Yeah. So some other strange behaviors that he engages in as a child. So he starts doing a lot of like sacrilegious pranks. At one point, he substitutes a cup of his own urine for holy water at a Catholic church.
But that's some prank.
That is the ultimate prank.
It reminds me of like a Jackass episode. Like, I'm Jim Jones and this is dirty water or whatever, right?
So, I mean, this is something he's doing. He's pranking people. And also like his use of profanity, I guess, is like really severe, which makes sense when you hear his preachings later, because he does just talk very casually and he has a trucker mouth. So like he'll walk by I guess it would be like common for him to walk by a neighbor and be like, "Good morning, you son of a bitch." It's just very strange, right?
But do you think that maybe that made him relatable, because most of his people are going to be coming from this like
but at this time he's standing out. Like nobody is wants to be friends with this guy. He's definitely not a liked person as a kid. It's hard for him to make friends. Here's what I think. His mom frequently beat him with a leather belt to punish him for his misbehaviors. I actually think he was acting out in order to get her to pay attention to him. I think that bad attention can be better than no attention when you're a kid at times. And
100%.
if anything, I think that like these pranks, these stunts, the language was ways to like, hey, pay attention to me.
Yeah. And what a scary way to have to view the world as a child when you know that
Yeah.
the people who are supposed to take care of you, who are supposed to love you so much, treat you like that. Like, what's the rest of the world like?
Sure.
Scary.
Here's a quote from Jim Jones talking about his childhood. I was ready to kill by the end of the third grade. I mean, I was so aggressive and hostile, I was ready to kill. Nobody gave me love, any understanding. In those days, a parent was supposed to go with a child to school functions. There was some kind of school performance, and everybody's parent was there but mine. I'm standing there alone, always was alone.
Wow.
So, I mean, this guy is lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Maybe it wasn't just getting attention from his mom. Maybe it was just getting attention from whoever would pay attention to him.
We see this over and over again with all these cult leaders so far, the three that we've talked about,
Yeah.
where they experience such depths of loneliness that they'll at any cost make it necessary for people to stay around him. Like he will make it almost impossible for people to leave his side. Eventually, in the end, moving the whole group to the jungles, like
Yeah.
it's so important for him not to lose followers that he becomes paranoid and obsessive about it. So
Yeah.
that's where this that's why it is important to go back and talk about this stuff.
For sure. So his interests as he becomes like an older child, a teenager, they really start to look different. Here's an interesting one that stands out for different reasons than like the shock value that people would probably take it for. He becomes fascinated with Nazis and with Hitler,
Mm-hmm.
which, if you think about his beliefs, contradict a lot of his beliefs. However, the thing that fascinates him, and this is at the start of World War II. So, I mean, he's seeing things, he's learning about it, he becomes fascinated. He gets really fascinated with Hitler's total power.
Yeah.
So it's not his beliefs. I think that Jim Jones is able to like look at these figures and like he can separate, which a lot of people cannot do. He can separate the person from like their ideals or their ideology, and he can get up like he can look at their personas, he can look at their personalities, and he can say like those are the things I want to have too, but I want to use those for my beliefs.
Yeah, like he was able to pick out what was useful about this person. It's like people who can still listen to Michael Jackson and separate that from the things that he's done. I think that's a perfect point, and I also think that he probably saw how Hitler was able to take the disenfranchised German population after World War I. They were completely, I mean, the American dollar was worth like $1 trillion back, like at that time we talked about that. And he's going to kind of try to do the same thing with the disenfranchised of America. Like, how is he able to get all these people on the same page? And he's interested in that. And he's able to, on a micro level, do it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So we're in high school. He is now going by the nickname Jimmy. That's official.
Yeah.
He carries his Bible and he dresses in his church clothes every single day.
You know what, Dave? I do have to interrupt you there.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to be a doomsday messiah, I think you got to do better than Jimmy. Right?
I don't know if this was in his playbook.
Although, is Jim Jones, I guess that name does stand the test of time a little bit. It's sort of synonymous with cult leader now, but Jim? I don't know. I just don't see it. But anyways, we're in high school.
Yeah, we're in high school. I mean, just from that description, carrying his Bible, dressing in his church clothes, like obviously he's not going to be a super popular guy.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also kind of a jerk. He refuses to respond to people at times if they address him first, and he'll only engage with them if he starts the conversation. He has difficulty making friends, obviously. And he's often confronting his peers about drinking, smoking, and dancing.
Yeah.
Like, all right, narc.
Yeah, I know. Come on, Jim.
What are you doing, guy?
And he's a communist and a Nazi lover. So it's not like he's definitely the least popular person in school.
Very much.
A communist in the 50s or early or 40s where we are now.
40s, yep. So an interesting thing happens in his life. He doesn't want to play sports, but he does decide, I guess he tries teaching younger kids to play sports. So he has like an interest in at least being able to watch a sports game. He goes to a game in Richmond, Indiana, and he sees the way that they are treating the African Americans at the baseball game, and he's witnessing like race relations right in his face, and it just bothers him. And this, he sees discrimination, and this is the first time it's really being brought to his attention and just like really just in his face. And it just creates this ideology about how he feels about racism and discrimination.
But do you think that he sees that and is actually has a heartfelt reaction to it? Or just now I'm starting to think, do you think he sees this disenfranchised group that he's able to exploit and he's able to be a leader of? Is that something that he sees the potential in being a leader to them?
Hard to say. I mean, who knows? I know that that's what it becomes at some point for sure.
Yeah.
He becomes like a leader of a group of people that he knows are wanting a different, life than what they have. And he identifies that. If that's how it started, I don't know. He actually, to be honest, I don't think that's how it started, because he does do a lot in his early days before he gets himself into some of those like maniac like mind frames,
Mm-hmm.
So just really quickly, his dad is actually like allegedly affiliated with the KKK branch in Indiana. So they obviously have very different views on race.
They do.
And at some point, his dad forbids him to bring a black friend home. And this causes Jim to not talk to his dad for many years. His parents end up separating anyway, and then eventually divorced. So he moves with his mom to Richmond, Indiana, and he starts beginning to work as an orderly in 1946 at Reed Hospital, which is where he meets his wife.
Okay.
So now he's an adult.
Okay, great. And so is this where does he, and it's, what's interesting to me about him is, for some reason, I really fell down the rabbit hole of him being a communist. Like I wasn't aware of that. And when does that start? When does he start? Is he already is that already his ideology at this point?
Yeah, I think that like it's already part of his ideology. It's already something that he believes in. It doesn't actually come into play until he starts one of his first churches. But I mean, at this point, when he meets his wife and they end up getting married, and they move to Bloomington, Indiana in 1949. This is around the time where he's going to join the ministry, and he becomes just, again, like more and more outspoken about racial integration. This is his mission, is for integration. And this does not make him a super popular dude. I didn't know this, but like Indiana, I guess, had like one of the largest, maybe not the largest, but one of the largest branches of the KKK.
Yeah, I read that. And I also read that in 49, the same year that he met and married his wife, or at least married her, Marceline, right? Baldwin?
Yeah, Marceline.
He talked to her about, and this is something I saw in only one place, and I don't know if you ran into it, but he talked to her about how she was very devout Methodist, and he told her that he was feeling like he's an atheist. He doesn't believe in God at all.
So that was later, from my understanding. And that is around the time where he starts to get hooked on amphetamines.
Okay, well, that'll do it.
So that, and so that has a lot to do with where he ends up. But that's in like the 60s. So in 1955, he establishes a Community of Unity, which it's a Pentecostal church, which later becomes the People's Temple. That's the church that we know, that goes to Guyana and everything. He starts becoming known for his work with the homeless, and he actually serves as director of Indianapolis Human Rights Commission, where he's really stressing this idea of racial integration. And he's going on the news in the 60s. He's on radio, he's on TV. He's just bringing a lot of attention to this idea of integration in local businesses, and they don't want to hear it. So the church gets targeted, swastikas are drawn on it. Shots are actually fired. A stick of dynamite is found. He's getting harassing phone calls. A dead cat's found on his lawn. It's like, this is a disaster.
What's the dead cat about?
Great question.
Was it just a coincidence?
This is when he starts to question God, actually.
Yeah. This also must be so, but his answer to questioning God is deciding that he needs to start his own church. Interesting.
Well, he had already started it, and then
Okay.
this is like happening, actively happening. And then he starts abusing the amphetamines.
Okay.
And it's just super stressful. It's just very, very stressful. And he starts to confess to his wife that he no longer believes in God. I think he just becomes, he's idealistic, right?
Yeah.
He has this idea like racial integration, peace, harmony, communal living. Like we should all be on equal playing fields. And then there's like the reality of life in the 60s and the 50s is like just he can't get away from it. It's in his face. People are harassing him.
So I think that if he felt strongly about anything, if he was like a really earnest about anything, it was about his political beliefs. And I think maybe at this point, just at this point before things get crazy, he believes that fine, maybe I don't believe in God anymore, but this might be the best way to make my political beliefs a reality. Like he wasn't all talk when it came to his political beliefs, that's for sure. He was all talk maybe when it came to religious beliefs, but political beliefs. And I think it's important for people to know, or at least understand a little bit of what communism is. And it's just essentially that thing you're saying, this idealistic view that, it's the elimination of private property. It's
communal living. It's
communal living.
We
Goods
all
chip in everywhere.
Yep. We all chip in. We all have a role to play.
Which is beautiful in theory. Yeah. But then, it gets a little difficult when it goes against our nature as human beings, because natural selection, we're naturally competitive. That's who we are. Like competition is how you rise to the top. Competition is motivation. So like if I'm a surgeon, a heart surgeon, and I'm making the same amount of money as, the guy who plays video games all day or whatever, that's not going to be very motivating for the next heart surgeon, right? To go through all that work. But
the thing here, though, like that's interesting is communal living isn't the downfall of what happens.
No, it's what he did.
Downfall. But also, and this is something I'm going to ask you at the end, like about your feelings about like his case conceptualization. He is abusing amphetamines for a long time. And do you know what like the long-term side effects of abusing amphetamines are?
Well, besides weird teeth and sleep deprivation, I'm not quite sure.
Hallucinations.
Oh, of course.
And paranoia.
Right?
And paranoia.
Yeah.
Which are what kill him. What kills this community. It's hallucinations and paranoia.
Paranoia, when you're already afraid, when you already have this like innate fear of abandonment because of your family, you've created this community. You finally created something that you think is worthwhile. You're immediately going to start being afraid that you're going to lose it. And then if you add the paranoia from the drugs.
He does actually have reason to be paranoid too. He's being targeted.
It's not popular to be anti-racist and fucking communist at the same time in the 50s, in the 60s, in this time of year. I mean, in this time of, this period of time in the country, it's like, that's even the FBI is kind of chasing after him at some points, right?
So he adopts several non-white children and he uses the term a rainbow family for his family. They have one biological son, Stephen, and I think he has 7 adopted kids.
He names one Gandhi, doesn't he?
I don't know the names.
I think he does.
So he also uses the term rainbow family for the temple as well, kind of demonstrating his view of the temple church as his family.
I mean, even if you say like his eventually going to name the name of his church is the People's Temple, that sounds very communist. Yeah. Like the People's Republic of China, the People's. It's all about like
and he looked up to the USSR, the Soviet Union. Like he wanted to move there at some points. He was definitely all in on that.
But for how long is this the People's Temple? For how long are they doing like good work? For how long are they doing this?
This is the beginning of the end. So like when he starts abusing the amphetamines, this happens over time, but this is like feels pretty rapidly like a decline in just his character and how he starts to act. So like he starts with the hallucinations and the paranoia even more in like 1962, he starts fearing nuclear war. And, for 5 years, this kind of goes on. And then in 1967, he tells the temple that the world is going to be engulfed by nuclear war,
Mhm.
and we need and we need to move for safety. And he reads an article somewhere about where the safest places are to go, and he reads that Ukiah, California, which is like northern, like Redwood area,
Mhm.
California, is within the 9 safest places to go to survive a nuclear attack.
So here's my thing with the doomsday. Once you're in the cult, it's 1967, and they tell you the world's going to end this year. 1968, you're still in the cult? That's always my problem. Like, I don't understand that. Like, how is he able to maintain the loyalty of these people after
Sure.
that date comes and goes?
I think a lot of it too is just how convincing he is. And I don't, so like the timeline of this stuff, I don't know, but like he does use like a lot of like evangelistic
Hmm.
style of preaching. Like he emulates that, he copies it for sure. And like he gets his church members so hyped in their masses, and he performs like fake healings and stuff like that. This starts to really rev up, and this is what I feel like builds his community even more, because they're looking at him now not just as like Jim Jones, this cool white guy that wants to help us, but now he's Jim Jones, the freaking prophet that
Yeah.
can heal us.
Well,
And
that's the thing, though. Even the people in the cult, when you mentioned the fake healings, like he hires private investigators and people to help him. Like the cult, the people in the cult know that he's creating these circumstances to make fake healing sessions. So
some of them,
how?
yeah, he has them
Yeah,
working with him,
like an
and they're
inner
like,
circle. He must have like sort of like an inner
they're
circle.
going through people's trash,
Yeah.
and they're looking for things to find out about people. There's this one where he gets a woman, like a woman's in a wheelchair and she can't walk, and he's like, you can walk. So she gets up and she's all wobbly, but then she's like walking and stuff, and it turns out she was part of the church, like someone he knew that he like paid to do this, not
Right.
even
Right.
probably, who knows. But like she was in on it.
So
Yeah,
that's what's manipulative. But he knows he's full of shit. There's all these things that say he's full of shit, and
this
and
is
and it's at
this
this
is
time
needed
too.
though, right? Like he needs to do this in order to build this community.
Mm.
And that's why I feel like this is when this, like I said, this is like the beginning of the end, because this is when he really starts to use dark psychology,
Mm-hmm.
to use the dark psychology in order to get to his end goal. And like at this point, it feels like he's really starting to just embrace the phrase, the ends justify the means.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I think it's interesting when you're talking about that, because it's making me think that the inner circle, even with our top officials in the government, like our presidents, their inner circle probably knows how full of shit they are in different
Yep.
areas, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, well, listen, guys, like this is for the greater good. Like he has to manipulate the majority of the cult, and he has to manipulate the inner circle into thinking this is what's best for everyone.
Yeah.
We have to
Yeah.
put on some kind of show here. This is what has to happen. And I think
He-
that's also interesting how he starts to refer to the Bible as an instrument of oppression, because in a way, historically, like we were talking about Paradise Lost, and the thing is, it's saying like, hey, Adam, don't look at the stars, don't get this information. That is sort of oppression. It's like how they're trying to get everyone to not be intelligent, not to know things. Like now we're looking at, and this is just a quick tangent, now we're looking at this AI stuff and this chat GPT, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, people can put in any question they want and they have the answers to it. They just want, I mean, who's giving those answers? They just want to keep us, oppressed or in the dark, or our knowledge. If you're asking this thing any question, if they're doing that in colleges, they're doing that everywhere. Like you don't have to think, you don't have to look. That's all part of being controlled. And we just fall into it in different ways over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's weird. Like it just like Hitler, and so, like he's kind of that same way where it's like there are things that he's saying that are useful, but most like he's too much of there's too much evil in him to be useful and as a whole. Got to be careful when you're talking about the good sides of these people, right?
Right. No, and I'm not like scared to admit, like I think take away from whenever he starts taking the amphetamines, like prior to that, I think that there was some positive things that I would have been able to look at this man and say, like, this guy's ideology I can align with. Like
Mm,
there are some things here that I feel like he was on track with. There, this changes drastically.
yeah.
So when they move to Ukiah, I feel like that is such a milestone for this whole story because he gets his whole family to move there. His 7 kids, his bio kid, about 150 members move there. This is their first experience with the communal living style. So this,
Mhm.
it's starting to build us up here. He tells his followers that the Indianapolis is going to be destroyed by a nuclear attack in 1965, which never happens. It's another one of those like Heaven's Gate moments where there's like, oh, we're going to get beamed up and this time, and it doesn't happen, and everybody's just looking at each other, and they
Yeah,
keep
that's what I'm
going
talking about.
anyway,
Like,
right?
yeah, but they still follow because now he's got them isolated.
Yeah. Yep.
And he's got their resources, right? Doesn't he start to just say like, hey, look, if you need to give your paychecks over, you need to give your assets, you need to give your property, you need to give your money for the
Yes.
church.
Yep. So he's getting people to do that. They're starting to go around they buy Greyhound buses with, some of the property that they sell of the members, and they buy the Greyhound buses and they start to go on like recruitment campaigns. So they're pulling in new members. He's doing his faith healing demonstrations, like I said. So he's getting everybody like really ramped up into this idea that he's a prophet. He's getting elderly people to like give over all their belongings. In return, they're going to be taken care of. It's just, the communist lifestyle is really starting to ramp up.
I wonder how he sells this, though. When Heaven's Gate went around on their recruiting missions, they were talking about Jesus showing up in a UFO. It's like, all right, well, I'm listening at least, right? Like you've got me for a second.
So you
like,
go
what's he
to
selling?
you go to a community that is, impoverished,
That's right.
discriminated against.
Mhm.
He's like, that's what we were kind of referring to earlier when we were talking about like the disenfranchised. He's going to people that like desperately want out of that lifestyle that they're in. And you hear it too. Like if you watch some of the videos on Jonestown, like they're happy in the communal living. Like there is something really sweet and like real about what happens in the communal, like with the community.
But it creates
take him out of there.
I get it. And it's the idea of communal living and this socialist communist ideas. It leaves a power vacuum, right? Where someone has to have control though at some point. And that's when it gets dangerous. And it also gets dangerous when like responsibilities aren't shared equally and someone's getting more preferential treatment. It's always a great theory, but human beings aren't capable of living this way. Everything being even. That's just not our nature. That's what I think, right?
You sound like a Debbie Downer.
Sorry, man. I'm sorry.
Maybe you couldn't lead.
Jonestown wouldn't have worked for me. Okay. No, you might be right. You might be right. That's right. It's not fair to me to, say for everybody, So I'm interested in, well, I shouldn't say this, but I am interested in when the abuse starts. I think
so it's right now, actually. Okay. So this is actually right around there. And, like Trouble follows him, but then he creates more trouble for himself. Like he doesn't do himself any favors throughout this whole time. So like all the stuff with taking people's money, selling their property, like this just draws attention from outsiders. And there's like, they start to investigate him. You start to get moles within the group. Like somebody, I think, spent like 8 years with him in order to kind of like investigate like the dealings that are going on.
Wow.
It's crazy. Here's something wild. Did you hear that he preaches that that everyone's gay?
I knew you were going to say that first. Yeah.
Everyone is gay, and he is the only straight heterosexual man. And anybody having sexual relationships, heterosexual relationships are selfish. Oh, actually, sexual relationships are selfish in general because they take away from the focus of community. And also, if anybody engages in like a heterosexual relationship, they're just faking it. They're just putting on a show. But at the same time,
here we go.
If you want your basic primal, primitive sexual needs satisfied, he's willing to do it for you.
He'll do it.
Whether you're a guy or a girl.
Yeah, he'll do it anyway. Any way you want. I mean, we're talking. I mean, that's wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone's homosexual except for me.
he
But I will
it's shaming,
pleasure
right?
you.
It's shaming people into not having sexual relations. It's not saying we all have to be celibate. It's actually, I'm going to publicly shame you and tell you that if you do it, you're selfish and you're not doing what we're supposed to be doing here.
What I thought was a powerful manipulative form of abuse was when they did this, the catharsis, and they would break you down mentally. They would verbally and physically assault you, tell you you're the worst person in the world, sometimes urinate on you.
Mhm.
And then Jim would end it and allow you back into his good graces. So it's like break you down and say like, oh look, I'm above you. I can take care of you. And that's very manipulative and very almost like boot camp.
If you did something against the rules, he would publicly punish you, beat you, have you box against multiple community members. So he would, and then there's actually, I heard sound footage. Did you hear the sound clips of him like chanting for them to punch him and to beat him? It's crazy. He sounds sounds
insane. He starts to sound insane.
He sounds on like,
and he would also do this thing when he's getting new memberships. I mean, these people have once they have nothing, he would force them to write down things and admit to crimes and awful things like pedophilia with their own children, whatever, things that they didn't do, just to kind of have this, blackmail. And Scientology does this. Scientology does this exact thing.
So it's blackmail, but what is it? What are you supposed to be proving? Like, why would you do this?
Devotion.
Yeah.
You're never going to leave him.
This reminds me of his infatuation with Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
He loves that total control. What more control can you have than to get people to admit to the most heinous acts ever for you?
For you. It's just like this proof. He needs this proof. It's it seems like an abusive relationship over and over and over again.
This is also where they do one of the things. I think this probably bothered me the most. And this is like some really disgusting things that he's doing to the members. This is where he does the first test of drinking poison.
Yeah.
So he gets everybody. They have these meetings all the time. He's always talking. Like, it seems like he's always talking. There's so many voice recordings of him preaching and talking and doing meetings. So he gets everybody together and convinces them to drink poison to show their loyalty to him. And guess what? They all do it. And then right after they do it, he informs them that it wasn't actually poison. It was just a test.
Yeah.
Imagine the mental just anguish you must go through at that moment.
Everyone's like, wait, so I'm good? I'm
Are
good?
you sure?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Man,
and then I'd be I think I would be genuinely embarrassed and upset. Like, I just almost killed myself, dude. Like, what am I doing? But they don't think that. That's not a thought they have.
Well, they're isolated. They're not getting feedback from people saying like, what are you doing in that group? They're just surrounded by, they're in an echo chamber. And like we can see how that like creates very one-minded people with like politically today. That's how it is. Like you just exist in your own echo chamber. You hear what you think is right over and over.
All this is going on. This is getting worse and worse and worse. These situations are so bad at this point. And guess what? The church gets bigger.
I know.
He moves to San Francisco. He opens up a People's Temple Church in San Francisco. And then the next year, he opens up a new branch in Los Angeles. So he's expanding. He's getting larger and larger. But then, like, as he's recruiting, they're doing the same manipulation. They're getting their investigators to like find dirt on people. And, so he's locking people in. And again, like you said, with the contracts and signing off that they did these heinous acts. So he's engaging all in manipulation. It's just getting so bad at this point. So he's at the same time, while all this is going on, he's expanding. Word is getting out though about like his actions, his views. They're threatening to write these long, like, there was some reporting is so big in this time. It's so funny. It's like different than nowadays. Like now it'd be like being on CNN or Fox News or something. But back then it was like being in the newspaper and having like an 8-page article about
Yeah,
you.
yeah, it was a big deal.
It was devastating thing. And that's like what was threatening to
Well,
happen.
and even now, the truth about what this cult was would be so hard to find too, because one station would be for it and one station would be
Right.
against it, and you wouldn't know what the hell to think.
Yeah, it would be so like divisive.
So how do they end up from going from LA and San Francisco, which are two major cities, to having to almost feels like in exile to the jungles of Guyana?
Yeah. So they threatened to put them out there. They threatened to write these articles about him. At some point in 1973, he's actually arrested by an undercover LAPD officer in a movie theater restroom for lewd conduct. He was masturbating in the bathroom. So he's getting himself into trouble. People are like starting to scrutinize him, and they're finding out about his financial misdeeds. So he needs to escape San Francisco. And that's when they start building Jonestown. And it's actually, at first is called the People's Temple Agricultural Project. And that's going to be like their beautiful model communist community.
Well, you know what's interesting? I think of it, it's like Eden. You have this piece of land that you're going to have to cultivate to be your promised land. I think that's pretty interesting. Yeah. But it's a terrible piece of land, and it's isolated in the jungles. Who would ever want to do that? Like, I don't understand.
304 minors, like 17 and under.
I know that's
to live there.
That becomes very sad. And you know, while they're in Guyana, he's playing, like you mentioned, with his sermons and his ability to speak over and over on a 24-hour loop. He's just playing his sermons and his speeches and everything over.
Oh yeah,
that's all you hear is Jim Jones.
And you know, you said it was like isolating. He cuts them off from any news. Like there's no TV. It's only Jim Jones radio all day long.
Like that movie, The Village. After a while,
yeah,
you know, it's very like it's creepy.
Yeah.
And so now that at what point does he? Because he's convinced now that there is no God. But when does he, if any time, does he ever think that he is the God? I know that's kind of what he's telling people at this point.
Yeah.
But he's God. Do you think that he believes that? Like, what's going on there?
I mean, I think on his drug induced state, I do think that he thinks he is God. It feels like, and when he says God, I don't think he means like I'm this guy in heaven that created everything. I think it's more like I'm a God, like I'm above everything. I'm in total control here. He brainwashes them. So, I mean, all right, so we're doing communal living. They're working long hours, sometimes 11 hours a day for 6 days a week. There's meetings all the time. There's educational lessons. They're all learning Russian because they have this goal to hopefully live in the Soviet Union. Their dormitory like living styles, the kids are usually away from the parents. Like he's got it all figured out, and ways to keep people isolated, ways to keep people busy, ways to just have them not pay attention to the things that he's probably engaging in. And also like to limit their worry about outside stress. Like he's trying to not get them to think about anything on the exterior, not their families, not anything except for how we're going to help this thrive. Right. But you can't escape. Like you can't escape outsiders. Like there's the family members of the people who go there. Like don't just say, "Oh well, my family member has gone to a cult, so I guess I'll never see them again." No, they formulate groups. Like just like we
Christmas comes and somebody's like, "Where's Bill?" And they're like, "Oh, he's still in the jungle." Like, what? What's going on?
We saw the same thing with Heaven's Gate. It was like the family members were the ones that were really like pushing the charge. So we got to get our family members back. And they had this with Jonestown as well. Like the family members wanted their family back, and reporters kept trying to come over. And at some point, this guy Leo Ryan, he's congressman in November, he decides he's going to investigate. So I think he brings maybe some reporters, and they're just kind of digging around. Leading up to this, Jim Jones is training the members of the church. And there's recordings of this too, so you can hear this. He's training them on how they're going to respond to the reporters if they're asked questions. And when they get it right, He's like, good. That's exactly what you should say. When they get it wrong, he shames them.
Yeah.
He, makes them feel like pieces of shit.
Of course. And there's recordings of that too, like him making people feel like absolute garbage. He's like really mean.
He really is mean. He really is. He does just turn into this giant egotistical monster at this point.
So the congressman shows up, and at first he's pretty impressed, right? He's like, wow, like you guys are literally building something out of nothing here.
He's like, yo, you guys are thriving. Yeah. You guys are killing it over here.
Until other people start saying, hey, look, Congressman Ryan, you're in danger here. Like you're in danger. And a lot of other people are saying, get us the hell out of here.
Yes, that's a big thing. So people want to leave too, and they're going to try to leave with him. So when they get so he leaves the day after he got there, I guess. I don't think it was a very long trip. And as he's leaving, he's getting onto his truck, and some of the members try coming with him. And then they get attacked by members and they start shooting up the truck. They don't end up hurting him. He ends up being able to get onto the truck with members and whatnot. And they leave and they go to, where his airplane is. And the temple members then launch an attack on the airstrip. This is where Leo Ryan is killed, along with 3 members of the press and 11 others who are wounded, not killed. But this isn't good.
No, the shit's getting real. They just killed a congressman.
They just killed a congressman. Exactly. And Jones, when he learns this, he kind of knew it was coming because I think he all right.
Ordered it?
He ordered it for sure. Because he ends up saying it. It's almost, there's a recording and it's almost like he basically acknowledges that he pretty much says like he's as good as dead. And this is actually, if I think when they did like the timeline, this was actually even maybe before it actually happened or while it was happening. So he knew that this was going to happen. So he immediately instructs over Jim Jones' radio, he instructs the outside temple members to commit suicide, which some do, which is super sad. People who aren't even in Guyana. And then
one instance is like a really sad instance, like a mother stabs her 3 children and herself because some asshole in the jungle told her to.
Stabbing yourself is your form of suicide too. That's
and your kids? Can you imagine?
It's so tough. Like, how do you even do that? I don't. That one, that was a rough one to hear and even try to envision. And this is where he then starts to enact his revolutionary suicide, which is something they practiced before, as I mentioned, drinking the juice that is laced with cyanide, tranquilizers, sedatives.
You don't change the whole thing. You got to drink the Kool-Aid. Well, it's not actually Kool-Aid. It's Flavor Aid, right? Like it's off-brand.
Ruined the thing I was just going to get to.
Oh, jeez, I'm sorry.
You suck. I said juice for a reason.
Okay, well, I had to call you out on that. So
this is how they do it. They first go around squirting in the juice into the mouth of babies and children.
Oh my God.
Via syringe. And then it's followed by being drank by the adults in the cups. It's grape flavored, I believe. Jones himself does not partake in the drink, but he is found later with a gunshot to the head, which is uncertain whether it was self-inflicted or a surviving member shot him.
Yeah, I hope it's a surviving member. And I don't know if you saw, like, I made the mistake of at least starting.
Oh, I watched.
You watched
the bodies. Yeah, you can see the bodies.
Did you hear like as they're taking it and the kids are like crying, they don't want to take it?
Yes.
And dude, that is like, I don't recommend people listening to that.
He has a cadence to his voice. It's really interesting. The way he talks, what would you call that? The afflection that he uses. Inflection. Yes, that's what it is. Inflection. It's very interesting. The way that he talks, it's like kind of hypnotizing because it's the same over and over. No, stop. Don't be emotional. Like it's just the way he talks.
Well, it's got a rhythm to it, and that's actually why I loved. As someone who likes to write and read like important works of literature, I really appreciate the way that Martin Luther King speaks. Yeah. If you ever heard his speeches, it's very like part of why you're transfixed by it is the rhythm and the cadence to it. And I think he ripped that off. Jim Jones ripped that off
Oh, he rips off everybody.
He rips
so
off everybody.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So I mean, it is like he's good at it. He's good at it though.
Yep.
And it's almost like evil and really dark that he has that quality about him. Cause it's like the perversion of a good quality is there's something really dark about that. And we talked about that over and over again with like, priests, police officers, whoever else. Like it's making something that's supposed to be good, evil is, or bad, or however you want to say it. It's dark. So what do you think though? What do you think about?
Let me just tell people how this ends. Cause like, this is something I didn't know. Like, how does this cult just end? Like, I don't know. So the 909 members died, at least 909. That was the number that I got. I heard a couple of other different numbers. So that's the largest mass suicide. That is huge. That is freaking huge. Less than 100 members in Guyana survived. So some did survive. I read 84-ish, I think, somewhere around there. Some of them left that day, or some of them were in Georgetown, which is like not Georgetown University, a local town over there.
Yeah, they were like playing a game, right? They were playing like a football game or something. And they came back and they were like, "What the?"
Yeah. Yep. Things escalated quickly.
Yeah.
Officials found a ton of firearms, hundreds of passports stacked together, $500,000 in U.S. currency. But then they also discovered millions more that had been deposited in overseas banks. The People's Temple effectively disbanded after the incident and declared bankruptcy at the end of 1978. And so long, People's Temple, which I'm sure has probably been revived over time. I would put money on it that some people have probably tried to revive it. So, Greg, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Thoughts about Jim Jones? Do you think, because like I pretty heavily think that substance abuse obviously played a huge factor in his mental decline, but like there's probably some mental health issues here too, right?
Sure. Like, early onset personality disorder, probably antisocial with grandiose delusion in the beginning. And then you add on this, substance use disorder, amphetamines, which is different than meth, right? It's like, it's its own thing. I'm not too sure about how that drug works. I don't think it's used that much anymore, right? Just amphetamine as it is. Is it speed?
It is a upper. So
yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it's just a combination of things with him. What do you think?
I don't know about antisocial personality. I guess some of his behaviors fit, like his early behaviors. I like to look at the way he was before the drug use, because I think that's the best way to like really tell, because I think he morphs over time. There's definitely something to that. I don't know, like his neglect played a large role, I think.
Absolutely.
In the way that he wanted people to want him. So he got no attention. He went from being in a situation where he got no attention and had to constantly seek it to I get all the attention. And that is such a crazy development. It's almost like he didn't know how to handle it.
I think, and I don't want to sound almost like gender bias about this, but it's like, if you put a female in the same role and maybe she develops like a borderline personality disorder because of the upbringing and the parents who weren't really around, maybe she grows up needing like support and love and also this fear of abandonment. But maybe with a man, especially at the time, he doesn't need the support and enough. He needs to be like capable and powerful. And he develops this obsession with this. Couple that with the, fear of abandonment. And you start to develop like, I don't know, almost like this potential monster, right? It's just a shift in how they what's important to them, like what's going to fill that emotional hole. And I guess it doesn't have to be a gender thing. I guess everyone's different, but I think that was what was filling it for him. Like he needed to feel useful and like he had a purpose, and he never wanted to be left alone again. And having this cult surround him, he never had to feel alone again. And he made it so he never will have to feel alone again. And if there's a chance that I am going to feel alone again, not only am I going to die, you're all going to die. And did he have the courage to kill himself in the end? What do you think? Like, so
I don't know. That's such an interesting thought. I mean, I kind of think maybe he did, because I don't really see how he would have saw a way out of it
He had
regardless.
millions. He had millions hanging around, didn't he? I mean, like you
Yeah,
said, offshore accounts, but he got
yeah,
500,000 in cash, and he's
sure,
in Guyana.
yeah.
He's already kind of got away. I don't
Mm.
know. Maybe I hope that someone like decided to take his life, and I that's what I have to like hope for, because I think that he was manipulative enough to just take off with the
Yeah,
money. But I don't know. There's no real evidence
yeah.
for that. I don't
So
know.
I mean, so just kind of going back to the original question, I definitely think that there is some. No, I'm not just because we kind of like it's easy to get carried away in this conversation with him because there's so many different things at play. But like, I do think that there is definitely some mental health things at play here, and probably more personality based because of that abuse and neglect that he suffered as a kid, and then pair that with some substance abuse and power. So
Mhm.
that's the other thing that topic that I kind of thought was like really prevalent in this. Prolonged power comes up again, and we've been talking about that in a few episodes, where somebody can get into a role even with the best intentions and find themselves a like just totally different person, and with and like it's so crazy how like their intentions can shift so
Mhm.
drastically
Well,
and
their
be
sense
so
of
dark.
self changes, right? Like who they
Yeah,
are changes. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Isn't that what they say?
yeah,
I mean, you start to believe the hype about yourself.
yeah.
It's
It's
really
it,
this is a tragic. If you hear like those, that you can hear the people dying.
so that poses the question that we've asked with the other cults: is this mass murder or mass suicide?
I think that in this case, it's without question mass murder. And I think the one thing that points to is what we're talking about. You know, Marshall Applewhite and Koresh died in the same way as their followers. Jim Jones wasn't even committed enough to die in the same way as his followers. He didn't drink the Kool-Aid, ironically.
Ironic.
That's it is ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, I definitely agree with this one. I think this is mass murder. You know, while they willingly drank with him, this feels like the manipulation used was different than other cults, and
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like that played such a different role in it, the way that he was able to fool people into believing this story. And when you listen to the death tapes, him saying over and over to them, like, there's a woman actively saying, like, are we going to go to Russia? We should go to Russia. Let's get out of here and go to Russia. And he's like, it's too late. They don't want us. They don't wouldn't want us there. Our
Yeah,
stigma's
she's
just
making good points. She's like, we can choose our own destinies. Like we
yeah.
can decide on. And he's like,
Everything he's been preaching this whole time
yeah,
is changed this day, and he's basically like, it's too late because what just happened in the airplane.
yeah. He
Wow.
acts petulant and he acts like a little child, and
Yeah. And
he's
he
going
and
to
he
lose it
shame
all.
he like at some points like kind of shames her, but then kind of changes because I think he can kind of sense that he has to play this one really good because he could lose members at this time. Like, people might start, if they don't like what he's saying to her, they might change their opinion about drinking the juice.
Mm. The juice.
Juice. The juice is loose in this one. I have a few random facts that I think you're going to appreciate, Greg.
Okay, hit me.
Do you know about Mr. Muggs?
No.
Mr. Muggs was a chimpanzee that Jim Jones claimed he rescued from scientific experiments, although he probably just purchased him at a store. And he was part of Jonestown. Unfortunately, and this is sad actually, because I hate when animals are hurt, he also had a fateful day that last day, and he was shot to death.
Oh, I was gonna say I thought he drank the juice.
No, they shot Mr. Muggs.
They shot the monkey.
They shot the monkey.
Why? I
Who knows?
feel like you were in the jungle. Let him go.
Mr. Muggs. That's
Oh
adorable.
my God. Let me. Can I? Before you give me another tidbit, I'm just thinking, what is more manipulative than your religious leader being an atheist?
And using religion as the buy-in,
It's
but
unbelievable.
then using it against you at some point. He is taking the Bible and throwing it down and saying, "Look, did lightning strike me?" Like, he's mocking it after he used it to rope you in. It's everything he does is so just contradicting and manipulative, and it really is crazy to think that, like, imagine being in that. Like, you are so confused, you probably don't even know how to get out.
I know. You're like, what is happening right now?
Here's another fun one. An elderly woman slept through the entire event. This is, I mean, it's not funny, but
No, of course
a little
not.
comical.
Well, I mean, it's not
That's
that
a little comical. She woke up and walked over to the senior center, only to find like bodies covered in sheets.
Oh God. Oh, they had already covered him in sheets.
I guess her sister was one of them as well. So I mean, this is the other thing. It's like
Dark.
you're like, even if you survive, your family members are probably dead.
You know, when I was looking to see if this was the largest mass suicide, there was a town in Germany where they were waiting the Stalin to his arrival, and I may have read this wrong, but there was like 1,000 or 2,000 people who committed suicide. You know, just all different ways, like holding weights and drowning themselves. And this, like, the facts might not be perfect on that, but if you look that up, like town where Stalin was arriving, mass suicide. I mean, it was pretty intense.
I've read a few sources where they said this one was, no.
We'll get back to you on that.
So approximately 304 of the dead, of the 909 dead, were 304 of them were 17 years or younger.
I know. I don't like thinking about that.
That's crazy.
Because they certainly didn't choose.
Oh no! And when you see the images of youth, it's lying along with the other. Like, it's such a crazy sight to see all the bodies.
I know,
and you can see that, which is also kind of like, what does that say about society? Wanting to see that, but here I am looking it up.
Yeah,
so
we are talking about it for an hour.
Yeah. Any pop culture references, Craig?
I don't think so. The Kool-Aid Man kicking down the walls.
Yeah, drink the Kool-Aid. I mean, that's phrase, even though it's factually incorrect, refers to this. It refers to Jonestown.
Like, you're drinking the Kool-Aid, though. We should make clear that means like you're buying into some bullshit.
Yep.
Like, if there's like a new boss at work and we're like, oh, he's drinking the Kool-Aid, right? Like, it means he's corporate dum-dum now.
Yeah. American Horror Story had a season called Cult, and they did discuss, and I think they featured some stuff about Jonestown in there and Jim Jones. There's a lot of like documentaries and made for TV movies, but 1980 made for TV movie called The Guyana Tragedy, the story of Jim Jones. You can find that on YouTube. I wanted to bring up a film that is,
of course, you have a film,
The Sacrament. Have you seen it?
No, Dave. No, I haven't seen that.
I actually loved this movie, and I knew it was like kind of loosely based on Jonestown, but it was before I knew really what Jonestown was. And it is a really good movie. It's like a modern day version of Jonestown. There's some Vice reporters that are going to check it out, and all chaos. And, you know, they have a great leader that is very reminiscent of Jim Jones. Definitely check out The Sacrament if you guys have a chance. You won't regret it.
Okay. Is that a newer movie?
Yeah, it's in the 2000s.
Okay.
It's kind of a indie horror thriller.
All right. Indie. There we go. An American Horror Story, which I think, and, you know, take it for what it's worth, after the first, I don't know, maybe 3 seasons went off the rails. No good. Am I wrong?
I think every season goes off the rails at some point and then turns no good. I like the first quarter of every season, and then I just lose interest because they add in 20 different new elements, and it's like, what are you doing? But
I agree.
Yeah. So that was Jonestown, a real bummer, man. That was
dude. I know.
Bummer.
You know what I was thinking? I was thinking there wasn't even a snicker in this one.
No, so I wanted to too, and I was like, I can't even muster a laugh.
We need to lighten it up the next one. I think the next episode needs to be a little bit of a, you know, relaxed fit episode.
Yeah, I don't know what that's going to be, but we will see.
We'll see.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for taking this depressing, long-ass journey with us. We will hopefully bring you something more joyful next week, but I can't make any promises because you know what? The joyful just isn't as fun. It really isn't.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I was learning about this super morbid stuff, but I'm not going to lie, I was very intrigued.
Not me, dude. I was like weeping.
Well, Keep listening, everybody. If you can, we would love for anybody who is willing to leave us a rating and review. If you go to Apple Podcasts, that's usually the place you can write a little blurb to tell us how you're liking the episodes. It means a lot to us, helps us know if we're on track or not. And if you want to request an episode, as always, just hit us up on the social media. That is the best way to do it. Everybody, have a great night. See you later.
See you later.